Morning. Today's topic for our discussion will be the basic structure of the Constitution. So what is basic structure of the Constitution? How it got evolved? How the elements of the basic structure emerged, and how it is very much significant for our maintenance of democracy in India. So what is basic structure? Let's take an example of a house. Okay, so if there's a house, so we first set the base before making the architecture or the interior exterior of the house. We first decide what is the base of our house. So that base will decide what kind of structure we are going to build, what kind of building or what kind of thing we will just emerge out of that prototype, that blueprint. So that is in similar sense what is basic structure of our constitution. So there are some fundamental principles, there are some provisions, there are some articles, there are some aspirations which are the makers of the constitution have go through with it. So these are those fundamentals which cannot be altered, which cannot be tempered, or which cannot be deleted from the constitution or can be amended. So in simple words, what is basic structure? The basic structure is the fundamental provisions or principles or articles which cannot be altered or tempered with. And how this basic structure doctrine evolved? So let's talk about the emergence of the basic structure. So this concept of basic structure was not given in our constitution, but how it got evolved and how it came into existence. So there's this history and there's a story behind it. So the question like whether fundamental rights can be amended or it cannot be amended, that came across. And when constitution came into being, then we got the article 368. It is article 368 which talks about the amendments that can be done to constitution, and amendments can be done in through simple majority, through special majority, and special majority plus ratification by half of the states. So how this evolved, the question arises that whether fundamental rights can be amended by the parliament or cannot be amended by the parliament via article 368. So what happens, there is case number 1, that is Shankari Prasad case of 1951. What happens, it challenged the constitutional validity of first Constitutional Amendment Act, where the right to property was curtailed. So this first constitutional amendment was challenged in Shankari Prasad case. And in this case, what Supreme Court ruled, Supreme Court said that the power of the parliament to amend the constitution under article 368 includes the power to amend fundamental rights. What Supreme Court said, Supreme Court upheld that power of parliament to amend constitution includes amendment to fundamental rights as well. That means parliament has the power to just amend not the part of the constitution, but it can amend the fundamental rights of the constitution as well. And the word law in article 13 includes only ordinary laws and not the constitutional amendment. So parliament can, so what happens, that parliament can abridge or take away fundamental rights. It is with the parliament what kind of fundamental rights they wanted to give to their citizens or not. So in Shankari Prasad case, Supreme Court upheld the power of the parliament that it can amend the fundamental rights. But then again, another case happens, which is Golak Nath case. And in Goloknath case of 1967, Supreme Court reversed its judgment. And what happens in Goloknath case, Supreme Court reverts its earlier stand. The constitutional validity of 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment, which is what? Which is addition of 9th schedule, was challenged. What is a 9th schedule? That whatever article will be inserted in 9th schedule have a blanket ban from judicial review. Those articles cannot be reviewed by the court. The Supreme Court ruled that fundamental rights are, here what Supreme Court ruled, that fundamental rights are transcendental and immutable, which means that Parliament cannot abridge or take away these rights. Then what happens in another case, which is Keshav Nanda Bharti case. Of 1973. The judgment which is given by the Supreme Court in Goloknath case was overruled. Supreme Court overruled the judgment which is given in Goloknath case. And here one new doctrine emerged, which is doctrine of basic structure, which stated that Parliament can abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights, right? But it cannot take away what is written in basic structure. So what is as a consequence, or what is in brief, that okay, Parliament can take or abridge any fundamental rights, or Parliament can change any provisions of the Constitution, but it cannot change the basic structure of the Constitution. And this basic structure doctrine was reaffirmed in Indira Nehru Gandhi case of 1975. In this case, what happened? Supreme Court invalidated a provision of 39th Amendment Act. There was a 39th Amendment Act. In 39th Constitutional Amendment Act, what happened? It kept that election disputes involving PM, Prime Minister and Speaker of Lok Sabha are outside the jurisdiction of all courts. In this, the court said this provision was beyond the amending power of the Parliament and it affects the basic structure. So, Supreme Court nullified this article. So, Supreme Court took its stand and also reiterated that this provision, where the election disputes which involves Prime Minister and Speaker are outside the jurisdiction of the court, will affect the basic structure. What? It will affect basic structure doctrine, and this should be null and void. Again, what happens? Parliament reacted to this jurisdiction, and the Parliament reacted to the jurisdiction which is the basic structure, and in 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976, It amended Article 368 and declared that there will be no limitation on the constituent power of the Parliament. What it did, that there will be no limit on the constituent power of Parliament, and no amendment can be questioned in any court on the ground that of the contravention of any fundamental right. That means that the decision of the Parliament cannot be, reviewed by the court or can be taken to the court. But what happens again? Supreme Court again, what the Supreme Court did in Minerva Mills case, invalidated this provision and also reiterated that judicial review is a part of basic structure of the Constitution. So since Constitution has confirmed a limited amending power on the Parliament, and Parliament cannot, under the exercise of limited power, enlarge the very power into an absolute power. That means Parliament has the power to take away or amend the Constitution, but it cannot take away the basic structure or cannot tamper with the basic structure of the Constitution. And again in Vaman Rao case, in Vaman Rao case of 1981, Supreme Court adhered to the doctrine of basic structure and further clarified that it would apply to constitutional amendments enacted after April 24th, 1970. This is regarding the 9th schedule. In 9th schedule, we have kept some articles which are beyond the power of being judicially reviewed. But all those articles which were inserted after April 24, 1973 are all subject to judicial review. Now let's talk about the elements of basic structure. What are the provisions, what are the elements which are a part of basic structure? But however, Supreme Court is yet to define what are the elements, and case by case basis Supreme Court is defining the elements of basic structure. So right now the basic structure doctrine is evolving. So what are the elements which are in the basic structure? First is supremacy of Constitution, then sovereignty, democratic, republic nature of our Indian polity, secular character of the Constitution, separation of powers between legislative, executive and judiciary, federal character, unity and integrity of the nation, welfare state, freedom and dignity, parliamentary system, rule of law, harmony and balance between fundamental rights and directive principles, DSPs, equality, free and fair election, independence of judiciary, limited power of the Parliament, effective access to justice, principles, the essence of fundamental rights, Supreme Court power under Article 32, 136, 141 and 142, High Court power under 226, 227. These all are the elements of basic structure, and other elements are yet to come which will make the basic structure doctrine and it will strengthen the democracy of our nation. And why this basic structure of the Constitution is necessary? Because when Constitution was framed, the constitution makers have some aspiration, some documentation that how our country needs to be look, and it made the constitution flexible and rigid at the same point of time. But the point is that there are some fundamentals which cannot be taken away by the mere act of the parliament. So those structures need to be preserved and protected so that our democracy could be maintained. And that is why the basic structure of the constitution and this doctrine plays a very significant role in present times and in the upcoming times as well. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoy it, revise it, and if you have any doubt or anything else, you can just pin down those things in our comment section. Thank you.